Thank you for being here to say as good as it smells that let's just go eat. Uh, Once a year we try to do, and we've called it for several years now, a Thanks Living Banquet. And the idea being is anybody can give thanks, but living thankfully is a whole different thing. And hopefully in our lives that's what we're learning, and as we grow in the Lord that we learn how to live thankfully, to truly take that whatever comes our way and to be able to see it. The last few weeks we've been looking at, last couple of months in fact, been looking at the life of Peter. And the series been doing is this rock, who's there? And the idea being is that Peter was called a rock by Jesus Christ. That was the name that Jesus gave him. And in doing so, that it seemed like Peter was more of a rolling stone than he was a solid rock, you know. And even there at the end of Jesus' life in the flesh that he told Peter, he said, I'm going to tell you right now, you all are going to walk away from me. And Peter stood up defiantly, no way, God, no way. And Jesus said, oh yeah? He said, man, let me tell you, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. And the cool thing is, that's not so cool, but it's at least cool to know, and that is that Jesus didn't say no to the devil. Now, I can't begin to explain my difficulty to wrap my arms around it, and I don't care how many years of Christianity and even being in the ministry has been. It's just difficult to really totally comprehend how God works in different things. And it's much easier to point to somebody else than it is to us. And I caution those of us that are believers that there are scriptures that we can give to people to encourage and to comfort, but there's a lot of times when you take this passage that you can make your way to over in the book of Romans in chapter 8, that God works all things to good for those that love him. There are plenty of times that really becomes a sarcastic slap upside the head, much less or much more than what was intended to be as this great comfort. You see, it's easy if you're the winner to look down on the loser and to be able to say that. It's easy if everything's going good in your life to go ahead and to offer that. But when you really find out what kind of rock you're made of, it's when the world rocks your boat and you're still able to say, but man, God is still solid on the throne. There's a huge difference, but that's what it's all about. It's really believing that he is Lord and Lord of all. Before we go any farther, just let me pray, okay? Lord, I know I already did, but I certainly don't want anybody that might be here today to misunderstand that I'm not here today because of eloquence or ability. The only thing I can give to you is my availability, Lord, and in my weakness, the promise that you are strong, that you overcome. There's not one thing that we can't overcome in you, Jesus, and that you'll use me, a bad example, as a good example of what you can do even with the worst of us. I thank you for my brother Paul, that, Lord, that we'll read some of the things that he wrote, inspired by your Spirit, and that in that, Lord, that he said he's the worst of all sinners, but I believe, Lord, that's only because I hadn't yet lived. And so today as we come together, whether it be me as a preacher, just as a Christian brother with others that are here, Lord, it's not because of our greatness and our perfection and how good we are. It's rather instead because of your greatness and your perfection and how good you can make us. That you are willing to, Lord, invest in us. And so today I ask that, God, because you're working on every individual that's here, even the one that's here skeptical. And God, that's cool to me that we could be a place that we'd say, hey, you don't have to come here because of your belief, but come to at least examine. And Lord, whether it's here directly or even the indirectness of God, only you can bless the ministry that we have through the media, what's being sent out. And this last week with Josh finding out that even in England somebody was listening in. God, only you can bless that, but I ask that it wouldn't just be blessed that people are able to hear and tune into a service. God, I pray instead that we'd tune into you and realize that there's not one of us, Lord, that you don't want to save. There's not one of us that's beyond your saving ability, and that there's not one of us that you don't want to work in after we're saved. And God, I just pray that today, and I sow for that, God, that you could fuel that you could encourage, and that you could, Lord, correct where it needs to be balanced out. But I just ask that you would speak through me, God, that you would speak in such a way that, Lord, that it would impact the lives of even the greatest skeptic of all. And Lord, impact that meaning that you would address things that I don't know that they said, but you do, or questioned in their mind, or thought about, or this week, Lord, that's upset. And I just ask, God, that again, that I would not forget what you called me to be first of all, after calling me to Christianity, was to be a servant. And Lord, life is great when we all live like servants of you and thus each other. And so, Lord, let me serve today. God, I may not be on my knees, but in my heart I'm bowed down before you. I don't want to misspeak, and I don't want to mislead. And so I ask that, God, that you would lead and you would speak, and that it might be my voice, but God, might there be something inside of the hearts and souls that, Lord, sometimes gives us the hair raises on the back of our neck in good ways, that people would know today you've spoken to them, and I just happen to be a tool that you'll use. In Jesus' name, amen. So in line with this idea of rock, who's there, that there are things that rock our world, there are things that happen, things that we wonder, man, if God was really a good God, why doesn't he intervene? Why doesn't he do something about it? Why didn't he keep this from happening or that from happening? Why didn't he do it different? And folks, I'm with you. I've got all the questions, and I don't have the comprehension to understand. It's just that when we've been given this book, and again, as I mentioned before, I'm not here to worship it, but I don't know what else to lead a church with besides the Word of God, because I've watched people that are very charismatic, and by that I'm not talking about their spirituality, I'm talking about their personality, that they're very charismatic and they can get great people or a great number of people to follow them. I've watched others that are very, very wise and dignitary type people that have this just unbelievable mind that's able to structure and to do flow charts, so to speak, and people will follow them. I watch and I observe churches, and it's not judging the person, but it's instead what it is that they're doing. And I've been to conferences and stuff where they've tried to encourage, and I still come back to the fact that when I stand before God, when it's all said and done, on my own and as a servant of his and even a servant of yours, when I will stand before him, the scriptures say that because I dared to teach, that I will be held in stricter judgment. When I stand before him, knowing that my feelings have oftentimes misled me, and so has my mind in the sense of logically thinking and everything that way, that it's misled me. When I stand before him, I want to have something to stand on. The only thing I know I can stand on is that I declared to you the Word of God, and that I used the Word of God to base my life upon. And by using it, what I mean is not twisting it to fit me, but twisting myself to fit it. Does that make sense? Because you see, that's what to me it's all about, because Jesus Christ identified with being the Word. John the Apostle wrote about him after he had dead and resurrected, and he wrote about him. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So Jesus is the Word. And so whether it's written or whether it was him living in the flesh or whether it's now through his Spirit, he is the Word. And there are things that, with this Word that we can count on. And the irony of all is that for those of you that know, and some of you laugh because it's like, what kind of a lawyer would you have been? But the irony is that's what a lawyer does. He takes the law, the things that have been written down, the statutes, and applies them. And I don't see a lot of difference between statutes and scriptures, other than this is a living, breathing Word of God. And what it does is it has effects. And as we believe it, it changes us. And that's what, for me, my job is to rearrange my life to fit with this, not because it makes sense, not because it feels good, but because I believe. Because the greatest thing I can stand before the Lord is not because of my accomplishment, but rather said, I didn't just believe in you, I believed you. And in spite of my weaknesses, in spite of my failures, that I kept getting back up, Lord, to believe in you again and to believe you, to take you at your word. And that's the greatest thing I could encourage any of you to do, because if we've got his word, then we've got his backing. And, there have been countless illustrations, and whether my granddad and the handshake, your bond is as good as your word, and all these type of things. I mean, we miss that day. I do. I miss that day when somebody said, yeah, I'll do that for you, and they did. Or when it's this much and it stayed that much and didn't change just because they ran into some other things. And when, couples stood before the Lord and made a promise, that promise stuck. Not because it was all that you dreamed it would be. No, it's because it wasn't anything like you thought it could be. But you found in the midst of it, there still was something that God was willing to do, because you stuck to your vow and your commitment, because you believed God. That's what changes every one of us, and that's what the part that when the world watches us, that's what they see as our inconsistency. Those of us that claim to believe, that claim to be Christians, they watch our lives. And you see, if we're just only trying for good, then why do you need God? I understand that. But if we're trying to be a tool of God and be godly, no matter what he asks us to do, that we're surrendered, like that song that we sang there right before I came up, let the mountains fall on me. First time I know that song. I love that song, and I appreciate when Henry does it because, I need sometimes that driving music, not just when I'm driving, but to keep on keeping on, And that's a good concept to have in mind. But I thought before I say that, I really need to think about what that might mean. Because there are promises that there will be times when even the believers will cry out, Lord, let the mountains fall on me. Just let me die. That implies the idea of instead of it being the worldly or the American way of preaching God and Jesus now is all the benefits that you're going to get. And that's what I've been looking at the last few weeks, which I know isn't a good selling point. Can you imagine going into a car dealership and let me tell you about this car. Here's what it's going to cost you in maintenance. In 5 years, here's what it's going to be worth. And I don't know if I would do it or not, but, you can compare it to this one because it's going to be this and this. If they told you all the bad, no, we don't do that. Imagine what it would be like a guy that's dating this chick that he really thinks is cool and hot and everything else. And if he said, now I want you to know something about me before we ever get any farther together. Here's what I do. I pick my nose, I snort and do this and that, But how many of you got married found out that that's exactly what happens? See, we don't sell ourselves on the bad things. We try to sell ourselves on being swab and deboner. And, then we think that's going to impress them. But see, God is so cool to me because he said, this is who I am and what I am. I bless, but my blessings don't always look the same. And the irony being is we went through this thing with Peter and got to John 21 where Jesus is compelling Peter, come on, man, I haven't disqualified you. Why are you disqualifying yourself? Come on, follow me, feed my sheep, take care, be a shepherd for me, man. That's all I ask you to do. Be a fisher of men, not a fisher of fish. And in the midst of it, Peter goes, well, what about him? As he points to somebody else. And let me tell you, as we're going into the Christmas season, we were with Ron and Jackie and went to a church in Florida that Lauren is, that she's here. Her church down there that Lauren and Ron introduced us to Suncoast and went there and they were finishing up a series that I'm just going to flat out rob. I loved it. It's something that's been in the back of my mind. But we're getting ready to head into this time of year where we talk about Mary. The way the Bible says that she was what? Blank child. With child. She was pregnant. But she was with child. She was expecting. And so what I want to do over the next few weeks, God willing, and you show up anyway, is that I want to look at these expectations that we have. And are you expecting anything? Is there anything inside of you that's growing? And is it of God or not? Anyway, Brooke, if you will, bring up, and I don't want to be redundant with these things, but I shared with you, these are some of the things that for me, I said Christianity affords us so many basics we can hang on to. These are absolutes in my life that when I lose track of where I am, when I'm going through the fog, when something's not feeling right, when I'm fearing, and let me tell you, the only answer to fear that Jesus kept speaking again and again to his disciples was what? Faith. But guess what? The other thing is he also taught them, even though he didn't come right out and say it this direct way, he taught them that your faith ought to override your feelings. Our fears and our feelings drive us. I watched the news. I saw some of the clips this last week. And I heard fears. And I heard, feelings talked about. And I'm going, God, please speak to them, your peace. And, it's just, no matter where you're at, and it just so amazed me that we could let one political thing suddenly believe it was the biggest thing. And I thought, God, how many people today are praying next to a loved one that it's a life or death situation? And we think this is a big deal? How many people are going through something that they've already lost in a life and death situation? The death happened and they're still recoiling. And this political thing's a big deal? How many people are expecting and they found out that through the tests that are done these days that the baby that you're carrying may not be whole? And we think this is a big deal? It's perspective, isn't it? The media tries to give us their perspective. I hope to try to, and I don't mean to say I'm good at, but my intention is to give you God's perspective. Because this is the one that you can count on not only today and tomorrow, but you can count on when you stand before God like I know I'm going to and give an account. What did I do with what you'd said? So here's what I established for me for navigating some of the fog, for being able to go through the things that don't feel good and things that I fear. It affords us so many basics we can hang on to. Number one, God couldn't love me more. Not going to spend a lot of time on this because anybody that's been here knows God is love, blah, 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 and we get tired of the church telling about God being love. But man, I mean, this is huge to me. I have to remind myself that, because guess what? Sometimes I don't feel like God loves me. Anybody relate? Do you always feel like God just, oh man, you're my favorite? I know some of you bubblies there, just a little bit got, but for most of us, it's like, why is this happening to me, right? God, if you love me, you wouldn't let this happen. That gets said in marriages, right? Well, if you really love me, hey, God's into the marriage thing, but he's not going to be tilted or tipped because we whine. Last week, what did we do? Wah. Called a wambulance. God couldn't love me anymore. When I'm established in that, I can take what comes my way. And I am so hesitant to preach this message because anytime you stand up and make this kind of declaration, guess what? You get the chance to prove it. But I believe this. And he always has. Number two, God doesn't love anyone more than me. It's equally important that I remember that, especially when we're so competitive by nature, especially when we think this way and anybody doesn't think like us. We've got to remember this, that God doesn't love anyone more than me or less than me. I mean, that seems impossible because we have a tendency to love some people more than we do others, and I've kind of tried to rearrange it to recognize there are people I'm drawn to that I like better than others, but I need to love like God loves. And that the more I'm aware of God's love for me, the more I will be able to extend that love to others. But this is an important one so that, again, my perspective is clear. Number three, God wants me to go to heaven and paid for me to go. I mean, are you not glad? God wants me to go to heaven. I mean, there's so many preachers telling you God wants you to go to hell. No, he doesn't. He wants you to go to heaven. He's done everything it would take. In fact, the Word of God says that all men will be without excuse. Nobody will be able to stand there before God and say, oh, you didn't let me know. He makes himself evident to everybody. He wants me to go to heaven. He paid for me to go. The only ones that will go to hell are the ones that didn't want to accept his payment or want to love him back. Nobody else will go to heaven or go to hell. But the ones that don't want to go through Jesus Christ, then that's your choice. But this is what God's done according to his word for us. Number four, then. I cannot get there on my own. We'll never be good enough. It's implied with that first one there, but that's just the truth. There is not enough goodness in any one of us to get there. If we add it all together, I didn't need a second chance. I need a whole new spiritual life, and I still need one today. For the 70th time, I still need Christ today. And it's not because I'm sinning so that grace can abound. It's just that I've finally come to the conclusion that no matter how many second chances he gives me, I'm never going to get it right. And that's what this book says. You can't get it right. That was what the whole law and the prophets was about, was so people would understand and go, well, who can live up to this? And if it weren't bad enough what Moses gave them and what the Pharisees added on top of it, guess what Jesus comes along and says? He said, you've heard it say, don't murder. I'm telling you, if you have hate in your heart, you've already murdered. That's all I needed. Make it harder yet. Have any of you ever hated? Do some of you honestly hate me at times? I know. I see the looks. I mean, it's like, I wish you'd be more clear and concise. I wish you're not as funny as you, But it's weird. Jesus elevates it and makes hatred into the equivalence of murder. And he takes other things that same direction. What's he saying? He wants us to the point that we finally realize, oh, how bad I need a Savior. Not just a Savior once, but a Savior that continues to save. And all he asks back in response to that is a little appreciation and thankfulness, and that we begin to get it and we start serving others because we're so thankful to him. Number 5, please. God has it handled. This one is the one we left off with last week. God has it handled. Nothing can happen to me without his permission. And basically, it boils down to no worries if we trust him. Now, if you're not worry-free, then I promise you it's a lack of trust. I'm not saying that to condemn you. I'm saying that from experience. I have found truly, truly that if we understand that we won't. this past Wednesday night, and I'm just going to briefly hit on this, but in the book of Matthew, chapter 6, that's the one that talks about worry. And most anybody that's ever been to this church somewhere along the line, because it seems like worry comes into it, whether I'm speaking, somebody else is speaking, about once a month at least. But why? Because we are, by nature, worriers. We've got the greatest country in the world. We have more luxuries than anybody else in the world, and yet we worry like nobody else in the world. There are Christians that are in these impoverished countries that don't even have good water to drink that are praising God right now and not worrying because God said, worry not. And so what is it we're worried about? And half the time for me, I finally had to analyze it down to half of it is I worry about the things that I chose to do without even asking God about doing them. But if I've asked Him about doing them and doing them because of Him, the worries are gone. But in that passage in Matthew 6 where it talks about that, and you can just jot this down and go back and read for yourself, but there's a verse that's separated because it goes into this don't worry subheading or whatever like that. But the verse before it, Jesus said, you cannot serve two masters because you'll love one and hate the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God, and he ends up saying money. But the realm there, the whole premise of that is we need to become single-minded, because when we're not, we're double-minded. And when you're double-minded, you're straddle something, and you're going to eventually, some things are going to go different directions, and you're going to end up doing the splits, and you can't handle it, okay? But this picture of that is so huge, because that's how we can get to the point we don't worry. Once we've allowed and established Jesus Christ as the Lord God Almighty, and that He's up here taking care of me, couldn't love me more, couldn't love me less, died for me, wants me to go to heaven. Once we've established that, we can, like Peter, then begin to get resolute about what we're willing to do. I'll go where you want me to go, do what you want me to go, or do what you want me to do, dear Lord. We'll do that. But until then, it's because you're still vying for attention and trying to decide what's going to be your master. Well, God expects me to have a good living. Where does it say that? He said, I'll provide. Especially your necessities, food and clothing. That's what he said. Now, he didn't promise cell phones or a super high-speed internet, or you go on and name it. But he said, I'll give you all that you need. Don't worry. I'll take care of you, just like I do the birds, just like I do the grass. I'll take care of it. And so in that's what I think is huge. And for you that are, wrestling with things, I want to encourage you to stop and put it into perspective. Is Jesus really your master or Lord? Because if he is, then this is what we can do. We can believe God has everything absolutely handled. Nothing can happen to me without his permission. Now, that's the part that takes faith. Not because things happen, it's because we don't want all things to happen. We don't really want to trust God with our whole life, because we think we'd be a much better Christian if people could just see how much God blesses our socks off. That's where we left off last week with Job and looking at him. And man, he lost, I don't even want to touch on it again, because I have had nothing in my life that comes close to losing 10 children in one day. Plus all your ability to produce wealth and your fields, your servants. He lost it all, everything except a nagging wife. He lost it all. The one thing that might have helped, and he lost it all, but she's still there. And guess why I say that? Because she said, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? Why don't you just pull the plug on this thing? This isn't worth it. Now, I'm going to give this to Job that's totally amazing. He didn't have a Bible. He didn't have the full story about Jesus Christ. He didn't have a crucified Lord and Savior on the cross, and he didn't have an empty grave. And he didn't have the Holy Spirit that you and I have been promised that with our salvation comes as well, so that we can have the mind of Christ. He didn't have any of that. And yet he maintained this unbelievable faithfulness to God. And he said, wait a minute, I'm going to put things in order. I didn't get here on my own. And when I did get here, I was naked. And when I leave here, I won't take anything with me. I'll still be naked. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, is how Job chose to do it. And I look at that and go, that's outstanding. You see, what we don't like about this is there are things that happen that God allows to happen, and a big part of me, I want to defend him and go, oh no, God wouldn't do that. It was the devil that did it. But see, what the scripture shows, just like with Peter, is, but the devil had to ask. Just like with Job, the devil had to ask. Now, what's vital about that is that we understand and know that it's because Christianity is a partnership with Jesus Christ. It's just not a contract you sign, and so you kind of try to do yours, and he'll try to do his part. No, it's an absolute confidence that you put in him that says, I will let you be Lord of my life. Now, half of the bad stuff that's happened to me, I would have to take credit for because it's poor decisions on my part. Would you agree? Not about my life, about yours, okay? Don't talk about my life, yeah. But yeah, half of the poor decisions, half the bad things that have happened to me are because of poor decisions on my part, especially those that violate God's will. Was God punishing me or what? Well, Jesus told us that this thief, that's the devil, Mr. Klepto is the Greek word for that, came to steal, kill, and destroy. So when there is destruction, when there is killing, when there is loss of whatever, the devil's fingerprints are on it. But guess what? God gave him permission. Now that's hard for me to say because that's not a good selling point when you're trying to sell God. But that's truth. And when we embrace this, folks, we have no worries. Because there's not anything happening to me but what God said okay. And if God said it's okay, then God will use it. But how? But why? But how come it has to hurt so bad? I can't answer all that. I can only tell you that that's when I have to go back to this thing of where I take my faith, first of all, and decide what it's in. And it's in Him, not in my feelings, not in my logic, because I can't make sense of this, and not in my pain. But I'm not going to fear because I'm going to trust in Him, and I will not be afraid. That's that song we sing. I will trust in you, and I will not be afraid. We can make up our mind to do that. Now, the next one then. God planned me, unique, fingerprints, DNA, everything. I am an individual. It is not a cookie-cutter Christianity. It's not a cookie-cutter world. We all have very much individual thing, and yet we all are linked, we understand, by DNA. We are all linked, and surprise, surprise, it all goes back to Adam. And then do you know who else it goes back to? No, not just Eve. That's true. Adam and Eve and Noah. Because all mankind was destroyed, and Noah brought it back again. God did through him. Now, I share that with you because that's the reason that it's vital that we don't always look around and see and compare to others. I love the fact that when I'm thinking straight, whatever my ministry is, He didn't tell me I was going to be like any famous preacher. He didn't say, you're going to be the next Billy Graham. You're going to be this. You're going to be... I'm Steve. I'm Sheepdog. And as that, what's cool is, and that's why the writer says, be sure to run the race that's marked out for you. Now, let me tell you, because a part of this series that we're looking at and being on the expectation has a lot to do with that. Because the quicker that we start looking at what God's got for us to do, individually, personally, for Him, that He designed us to do, the less we will look around at others and the less miserable you'll feel. I am fully convinced that I am alive not only because God didn't say not yet, and in spite of a death-defying disease, so to speak, but because of your prayers. Now, that's the one element in all this that's so bizarre to me because I don't know why God even wants us to pray, because if I were Him, I'd say, shut up, I'll just do it my way. But He wants to hear from us. And He wants to pray because I think, one, knows we need to unload upon Him, so to speak, to cast, as what Peter said, all your burdens on Him because He loves you more than you think. I think God also loves to show us that prayer does make a difference, and when we unite together, there are amazing things that happen that are out of the ordinary. And it's for those of you that don't know, and it's not this big deal, so to speak, but it's a big deal in my body anyway, that there's this blood clot that formed that this guy said it's like cancer. The only thing, or not cancer, concrete, and the only thing that can go ahead and get rid of it is a liver transplant. And I should be sick and this and that, and my blood says I am, but thanks to God, I feel pretty good. And some people go, well, why didn't God just wipe it out? I don't know, because you all prayed for that. I'm thankful for that. I'm glad. But which is more miraculous? That it's gone or that I'm healthy and it's still there? And how many things in your life right now you don't have a clue that are going on? I've known people with aneurysms and various things and blood clots that, man, they may have been there for years until they move. And this thing here, I mean, I don't know. There's probably going to come a day where I'll either have to get a liver transplant or I'll die. I don't know. God can do whatever. There may be a day I go back down to Mayo and they go, it's gone. It doesn't make any difference. While I'm alive, guess what I'm going to do? Live. Thank you. I'm going to live. How about you? What are you going to do while you're alive? But you see, so often we're backing into the future, worried about the past, afraid to look at the future even. But when you just begin to believe that God's got a plan, It settles it. Next one then, if you will, please, Brooke. And that's this one, that God does have a plan for me. And it started when I was born. He knows when I'll expire. He's already picked it. He knows exactly where. That Acts 17 says he determined the time set for us. That means birth date, dead date. Just like your tombstone may say, or just like that little card they'll pass out at your funeral. And see, I can look at it that way because that's all it's going to be is, hey, Steve's gone. Oh, I didn't need a card to tell me. I can see that. You know? I mean, hey. But he's got a plan. I think he knows when it's going to be. But that idea that he determined the time set for us and the exact places we should live, but it goes on to say this, so that we would seek him, reach out for him, and find him. That's why I keep emphasizing to this body of believers that one of the worst things that can happen is to be a church that never gets to know each other, because God says we're like a body, one body with many parts, and we all are equally dependent upon each other. Just because somebody seems to be more important. The preacher in this church is not any more important than anybody that just stepped in because of God's plan. But this idea that God can cross our paths, I've met more people from Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Missouri since I've been here than I would. I mean, I just can't believe how many people in this church, out of 4 million people in Atlanta, that I keep coming across, that it's like, we were a lot closer up there and less people. How come we never met? Because God knew when it needed to happen. And it's so that we could be an influence on one another. God's got a plan. A couple weeks ago, I had Rob stand up and show those because he came as a result of this deer hitting me on the motorcycle. I didn't tell you the other story. Because before that ever happened, for 3 years I prayed. I wanted a Harley, or I felt like I did. So what did I pray for? God, give me a Harley? No. I should have. That would have been really smart. Just give me one, it'll show up someday. No, I started praying and I was like, is this just me or what? Julie was getting me stuff that, from stationery to whatever else and little knickknacks for my office with Harley on it. And it was just there. And I'm just praying and saying, God, please. Some of you may not even remember, but I actually brought it to you as a church after about almost 3 years of praying. And I finally brought it and said, man, I need you all to help me out. I don't know whether this is just one of those things I want to do, and it's in God's okay, permissive will, or is it something God wants me to do? Because that would be really cool for me, is I would much rather do it because I feel like God wants this to happen. And I'm just caught here in between because it's an investment. And that day after church and praying and everything, that day after church, and there was a little bit prelude to that, this two couples started coming to church, Cindy Daniels and Raven. And they, found out that I had ridden before and talked about getting a bike. And I remember, I think it was for Christmas, they gave me, or sometime, maybe it was Pastor Appreciation, they gave me this jug that said Harley Fund on it. And they started it out. It only had $10,000 in it, but that was just, no, it didn't either. It didn't. That would have been, okay, God, I don't need any more. I got my message here. But they started that out. And then I presented to the church, and there were 2 different guys that came out that day that say, God never has spoken to me in my life, but he's spoken to me. And man, I can say with full, I don't know. And one guy was almost crying as he said it. He said, I, for whatever reason, feel like I'm supposed to tell you, get the bike. Another guy said, get the bike. And he reminded me that what brought him to church was he was riding, of all places, in west central Illinois and Iowa, down the Mississippi River. And they went to eat after having a flat tire, which is a frustration on a motorcycle, in a rainstorm. They went to eat in a little place called Dallas City, Illinois, a river town of maybe about 700-800 people. And it was chicken night, and they ate, and as they ate there was this guy and his wife that were sitting, I don't know whether it was back to back in the booth or at the table over to the side, that struck up this conversation for him, and that guy's name was Dennis Pettit. And he told this guy, he said, my son lives in Atlanta, because he said, where are you guys from? He said, we got caught in this rain, motorcycles, we're from Atlanta. He said, what part of Atlanta? And I goes, I don't know if you've heard or not, Woodstock. He goes, yeah. He said, right there around Woodstock, Ackworth? He goes, yeah. How do you know? Well, my son moved down there. He's a preacher. Well, I'll have to meet him. Now, you talk about God determining times and places. Now, is this bizarre or what? And so the second guy that comes out and tells me that says, I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for my motorcycle and your dad speaking to us. So it gets better now. Finally, I called Dad and I said, Dad doesn't really like it when I do this, but I oftentimes would, and I'd say, okay, God, I'm going to then, and I'm not trying to be belligerent here, I just don't want to do something foolish, but I'm going to call Dad, and would you speak to me through him? So I called Dad up. He almost broke into tears and just got that thing in a voice that I inherited from him, when you just get choked up and you don't want to cry and you're trying not to cry, but it sounds like you are, and really you're not crying, you just can't get enough breath, But he said, well, I hate to say this. He said, if you lived up here, it wouldn't be near so hard, because he said, I think it's just absolutely ridiculous and stupid to even think about riding any kind of a motorcycle in Atlanta, in that traffic. But he said, I feel like God will use it like he did the Bronco. So I got a bike. Not saying that that's the way to do it. I'm just telling you, I just didn't go out and do. I had prayed, and I'm not saying God blessed it, but that's why that story I told you about the deer hitting me, I'm like, what in the world, God? What the crud you got going on here? But what I want you to know before that, and that's what, I screwed up that last time because I saw Stonecipher sitting back there and Raven's over here and all, but you see, Raven was the one that encouraged me to have our first blessing of the bikes. And because of him, the Stonecyphers, the Wigingtons, and I don't know how many others came. And so this domino effect begins to happen. Why? Because God determines not only when we'd be born, when we'll die, and I believe we can't die until it's done, but even where we'll live. And I think a part of that is what we'll do. We're that unique. And it's not like you're like me and I'm like you, and it's not like for some of you that's a stupid story to tell, but I'm just telling you, man, it's interesting for me to begin to see how the dominoes fall, because there's a variety of people that I never would have met here, unlikely that I would have met if it hadn't been for the motorcycle. But especially if it hadn't been for the deer hitting my motorcycle. And within that, I want you to begin to step back and to look at your life and go, wow, God, what have I missed? What things have you done with me that at the time I'm still railing against you? I can't believe you ever did that, where it was exactly what I needed. How many of you are here today, and you don't have to hold your hand up, but are you here because you were either mad at God or you didn't even believe in God, but you were desperate for God and you knew you needed a miracle, and so you came to this church that some friend had told you about. And you found that God did answer that prayer and was merciful to you. That's how he works. I don't understand it. I can't hardly explain it, but I'm telling you, this is cool to me that God's got this plan, because he's God and he wouldn't be much of a God. And like I said last week, his ways are beyond our ways and his understanding is beyond our understanding. I mean, if I could explain God, he wouldn't be a very big God. All I can do is give you pictures in my life that I'm thankful that he's that big, that he would still use me because I'm so insignificant. But he will use any one of us if we'll just surrender. Had I told him no and I went on to become a lawyer, I wouldn't have met you. And I'm as close to many of you as I am to my own family. How does he do that? And yet we've grown closer together, not because we have all this stuff in common. We've grown close together because the biggest thing we have common, we need each other, so we do let him stay as Lord of our life. We believe he is, but we need to keep him there, right? That's what the church is about, is we help each other. It's like Moses when he held his hands up, or Joshua, I don't remember which one it was. They were winning the battle, but as the arms started to come down, they started losing. Why did God do that? To show it takes more than just one person. We need each other. And that's why today, as we sit down and pull our legs underneath the table together to eat, something that the disciples and Jesus did, only they didn't have tables like we do, but they ate together. You get to know people. And we all think we already know who we want to get to know, and you're missing out on some of the greatest people you would never meet if you don't stop and understand God's crossed your paths with a purpose. God's plan includes others. There are those that I'm to leave an impression. I don't mean impress, but to leave an impression on. There are those that I help to shape. There are those that help to impress and shape me. It goes back and forth. God uses people, and the end result is so that we don't miss him. I don't remember, I think I got an 8 there, Brooke. What was it? And then he got outside the biblical God as just a little G-O-D. And you can design those all day long. You can fashion it into an idol if you want it to be an idol. You can make it to be the tree or the sky or whatever you want it to be. But I'm telling you, the Almighty God isn't just anything. He has told us who he is. And the most phenomenal thing is that God said, don't make an image that would represent me. But for every one of us he calls to follow him, he says, you be my image. I don't make a very big God. But God has said he would use me to help others see him, just like he'll use you to help others see him. And imagine what happens when a church pulls together and we see God in each other instead of all the differences that there are. Now, on a practical side of this today, then, I want you to look with me at this chapter, Romans 8. And I've already blown my time telling stories here, but I want you to know that it's because of these scriptures that I see these things, and that I want you to see them so that we can begin to understand. In Romans 8, verse 18, and that one's good there too, at verse 18. I consider our present sufferings, whatever you're going through, just got through, or just about to go into, because we're all suffering someplace, right? Our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. If you're a believer, you're a Christian, you can count on that. Then whatever you're going through, the deer hitting your motorcycle is nothing compared to what the glory is going to be when you get to meet people because of it. That's my story. I don't know what yours is, but our present sufferings aren't worth anything. Next verse then. The creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. Not only is this entire planet and the trees and the animals, but I mean, people are still waiting for the sons of God to be revealed. They're wanting to see the real deal. And when we're, motivated out of our feelings, and we're motivated out of our emotions, and we're motivated out of our great logic, or we're motivated out of our great fear, people don't see God. But when they see us standing there in the gale force storm and going ahead and going, well, I can get upset about this, I can be panicked and paranoid about it, or I can trust God's got a purpose for it. And then God says, so get out of the rain, dummy. There is a place over here. You don't have to stand there in the gale, but you can get out of the rain. But sometimes we can't get ourselves out. Trust. Because somebody somewhere is looking, and they're going to see God through you. And typically it's not through you being lifted up and getting some great big award, or standing there with the Georgia Lottery, 2.2 million. They're going to be impressed because they see you enduring something that normal people wouldn't smile while they're going through it, let alone give thanks. Do you see? The next passage then, please. That thing gets, it's kind of got a mind of its own. I'll read you the next one, though. Okay, for the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one. And you can put a big square around the one, because that's God who subjected it. In hope, and then we read next, that the creation itself will be liberated, will be set free from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. That's what we've got. If you claim to be a child of God, guess what you've got? Not just freedom, but a glorious freedom, okay? And that's what, if we start living like, I think the world will be looking at us, and when especially they see it, that we're not doing it because everything goes our way, but we're doing it in spite of what doesn't go our way, they're going to become convinced that you believe your God is real. But as long as our God's only good, if he's being good the way we consider goodness, and if he's only God when he's blessing me in the way that I like to be blessed, the world's going to look and go, you spoiled brat. But when they see us going through and enduring things, and with a smile, with thanksgiving, still willing to praise God, though the mountains fall on me, I will still praise him. That's what the world's looking for. Now I'm going to jump on down. It's not that none of the rest of this is good in there, but if you will, then go on to 28, because it's the one you oftentimes hear, all right? Verse 28, and we know that in all things God works for the good, in all things, in anything that's going on, in all things that are happening, all things that are real and all things that are, God is working for the good of those who love him. He's going to do something with your life. Whether it's portal vein thrombosis, whether it's getting hit by a deer, whether it's going through the windshield of a car when you're 6, and I don't have any idea. I don't have any big stories to tell you about how many people came to accept Jesus, because I just know that when I was calculating about going into the ministry, I thought, well, I should have been dead when I was 6. Because the doctor's like, I don't know how in the world he lived. So God's working all things to the good of those that love him. What do we got to keep doing? Loving him, man. Make up your mind. I'm going to love him no matter what. Who have been called according to his purpose. Doesn't say that all things will work out for you the way you think they should. It just says God will work them all out to good. And his kind of good is better than others. And then the next verse says what? For those God foreknew, he knew us ahead of time, because that's what we've looked at over the last few weeks. He also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son. In other words, he's going to do everything he can to get us to run into Jesus so we can become like him, so that he might be the firstborn among many. That because we meet Jesus and we're also born again, and as people meet us, they get to know Jesus. See how that works? And this passage just goes on to tell this, and then it says, basically, jumping on to verse 31, what then shall we say in response to all of this? If God is for us, who can be? You sound real convinced. Say it like a preacher would, man. If God's for us, well, who the crud can be against us? Unless you're not convinced. But that's what the world's waiting for, is convinced Christians that believe God is for us. That believe, I don't care what happens, God's got a plan. That believe that it has nothing to do with the presidential election. That believe it doesn't make any difference who's not only in the White House, but who's in whatever, in Russia, in China, in North Korea. It doesn't make any difference. What's our response? If God's for us, and who? Nobody can be against us. They can rile like they are. They can come up. And we have the book of Acts to show people like Paul, who wrote this letter of Romans, who wrote so much about, the half of the New Testament, if not more. We have Paul writing all these things, and guess where he wrote most of it from? Prison. Thank you, God. I'm glad the man had to slow down enough that he could write. We wouldn't have these promises if Paul's life would have been nice and he'd have jetted around all over being the great evangelist that he was. Instead, he continued to run into problems. And I'm running into problems too because I'm out of time. Can I give you a few passages just that you can at least think about? One of them is 1 Timothy chapter 2. And it says that first of all, that one of the things that we ought to do is to pray for all people in authority. Why? So that we can ultimately, it says, live quiet and godly lives. Not so that the stock market will go up, not so it'll go down, not so that this, not because of that. Doesn't mention anything about that. It says you do that and you pray for those leaders, not just the ones that are in America, but the ones around the world. Next time that you're ready to gripe about something not working right, let me ask you this. If I were playing God for a moment, I know you don't want me to do it very long. What have you done to make a difference? That's what hooked me coming into the ministry. I told him all the things I didn't like about the church. And the guy, as he walked off, said, what have you done to make a difference? Anybody can gripe about it. And he walked off. That's what I realized. Same way, how can we complain about what's happening in the world when we haven't even prayed, not against, but for those people? Period. That takes faith, because logically it doesn't make sense and your emotion's not behind it. But if you want to be scriptural, you want to believe the Word of God, why not do it? I wonder what would happen if this church, if the 150, 200 people here just said, God, from now on for 1 year, I'm going to pray every day, not only for our president and the Congress, and please pray for your preacher, and for the people in these other countries. I'm going to start digging out and find out who's the president or the queen or the king of Papua New Guinea, and I'm going to start praying. I wonder if instead of the wars there might be revival. What do you think? I wonder how much different we'd feel about everything that's taking place, because right now it may look dark as dark to you, and right now you may be tooting your horn going, this is the greatest thing. How do you know? I can't read it. I only know this. I know it tells me to pray. I know, back it up to Romans 13, you can read there pretty quickly in it, verse 1 and 2. There is nobody in authority but what God's placed them there. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't understand his logic, because I'm not sure why that. And I can either say, I don't believe that, or I believe it. Which one do you think is going to benefit me more? Believe it. There's nobody in authority but what God's placed them there. So why don't we begin to, with our great imaginator, go, wow, God, maybe it's because of who's in authority in these different places that there are going to be people that are going to get to meet you that never would have met you if everything had gone their way. And there's a lot of us, folks, as Americans, because we are so bent on feeling good that, you know what, if we never had any adversity, I'm afraid what we do to ourselves. Because it's usually in adversity that character gets developed, right? So I want to encourage you to not just listen to me, get a different perspective. This book pretty much tells it all. Guess what? When it's all said and done, there's nobody going to be an authority except Jesus Christ. Because he already is Lord of all. But the scriptures say he's waiting for the day when God turns it all over to him. And if you begin to read these passages, you'll begin to see is what that Romans 8 says, we're more than conquerors. But it's because of our faith that's in him and what he's doing in spite of what we think, feel, or fear. As Henry comes up or whoever's coming up to do the invitation. Do I have anything else I want to say? Oh, yeah. I want to encourage you to read James 5. Because James says, man, if you're in trouble, pray. If you're happy, what are you supposed to do? Sing songs of praise. And man, a country divided, guess what happened this week? Some prayed and some praised. Some thought it's hell and some thought it's heaven. And I just not even sure. Other than God's will was done. Yes. But it will continue to be done if we pray. It may not get fulfilled if we don't. I want to pray for those people that are around him. I want to pray for our president that's leaving, that there would be people that would cross his path, that would in turn cause him to seek God, reach out and find him even more, just like I want for the current president-elect, just like I want for our Senate and our Congress, both in the United States, but here in Georgia. I think the greatest thing that can happen is that people, men and women, meet God face to face before it's too late. What do you think? And I think that we can do something about it, but right now you may be like me and I'm not sure what. Well, why don't you pray? Because some of you were sure praying Tuesday night. Is that fair to presume? And I wonder, it is time to quit. I wonder if there was this tug of war going on with God. What do you think? No, I think he was kicked back going, this is in the can, man. I got it handled. Which is why I brought this up today as we get ready to sing. A year ago, we did this theme, Our God Can. My God can. Now, I think ours can, but it's only if it's the one of the same God. And we've all got different ideas of who or what God's like. But that's why I'm saying, this is the perspective I want. Let's take this God. And if he can, then don't allow yourselves to get so upset so quickly or to get so elated so quickly that you think you know what he's doing. Because if there's one thing I'm convinced of, I'm not sure. Other than he wants to be Lord of my life and to reach everybody he can. And the more I allow him to be Lord, the more effective I will be in others seeing God for who he is. And same way with you. If we as a church can not only just pray for these people, but also at the same time pray for him to be Lord of our life, that we would not miss and mess up our opportunities, good and